Hi YouTube family, it's Mrs. Rains here. It is Vlogcember. It is day 4 today, so of course I had to come at you with the sermon notes while it's still kind of fresh in my mind. I know that a few of you have reached out to me saying that you enjoy the sermon notes, so I really do appreciate the encouragement. I love to share kind of what we've been going over so that I can, first of all, it helps kind of heighten my learning, and it also helps to share with someone else what you've learned because as Christians, we should share what we know. The gospel is meant to be shared, not hidden. So, anyway, we are in 1 Samuel chapter 27. We went through verses 1 through 12, the entirety of the chapter, basically. And you would think because it's such a short chapter that it wouldn't be as jam-packed with information, but this one does not disappoint. We're still following David along his path to becoming king. He's been in the wilderness now, running from Saul for about 8 years. This is about 2 years before he would actually become king. He's been on the run. He's been sleeping in caves. He's concerned about Saul lurking around from every corner. And basically this lifestyle he's leading has taken a toll on him. So he starts to become discouraged and he starts leaning on his own understanding. So our pastor talked about how sometimes these are the times when you're most vulnerable because you've toiled and toiled and toiled, and now you've come to this point where you're leaning on your own understanding because you start to forget about God because you're under a certain set of circumstances. So David started having this false thinking right from the very beginning. So the very beginning of the chapter says, David thought to himself, one of these days I'll be destroyed by the hand of Saul. The best thing I can do is escape to the land of the Philistines. So this man is actually considering, remember, Philistines are his mortal enemies. So he's actually considering fleeing the country and going into enemy territory. So he's actually entertaining the idea of not only going to enemy territory, but dwelling there amongst the enemy or with the enemy. So it's like, how convoluted is your thinking that your way to escape one thing is to basically go from out of the frying pan and into the fire. So this false thinking leads David to start to lean on his own understanding, and he starts wanting to take action. So this thought process he had, and this is so true. The enemy gives you, you get these thoughts, and the enemy is just so rampant in your mind, and those thoughts start to permeate every part of your life, and you start trying to figure out ways how to get yourself out of situations, not leaning on the Lord, but on yourself. So here we see that Saul, who had been chasing David, and the enemy were not really David's biggest problem. So it wasn't necessarily Saul that his biggest problem, because we're told here in, it looked like in chapter 27, verse 4, it says, when Saul was told that David had fled to Gath, he no longer searched for him. Okay, so Saul's not the problem, and the enemy's not the problem, because it says that David went to Achish, who was the king, and said, if I found favor in your eyes, let there be a place assigned to me in the country town that I may live there. Why should your servant live in the royal city with you? So David has now become the servant of the Philistines. So the Philistines are not his problem anymore, and Saul's not the problem anymore. What becomes David's problem is David's own heart. So Jeremiah 17:9 tells us that the heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. So David is deciding, you know what? I'm going to trust my own heart, my own, people say I have this gut instinct, or I have this. A lot of times people try to make a decision and kind of pull the Lord on behind on a string, and that's not how it's supposed to work. The Lord's supposed to go before you in every decision, and David was not making godly decisions at this point. So then, the pastor talked about Psalm 27:1 through 3, and also Psalm 84:10. Although David knew better, he was ignoring what he knew, and he traded his integrity for what he perceived as relief from the enemy. So in order to outrun Saul, he basically runs from one perceived enemy into the next. So he never really gets that relief. He ends up becoming a bandit. We're told later on in chapter 27 that David became he was a raider, he was a murderer, he became ruthless. And it says that now David and his men went up, raided the Geshurites, the Gizrites, and the Amalekites From ancient times, these people had lived in the land extending to Shur in Egypt. Whenever David attacked an area, he did not leave a man or a woman alive, but took sheep, cattle, donkeys, camels, and clothes. And it says, then he would return to Achish. So he would go to the king, and the king would say, well, who did you raid today? And he actually lied about it. He said that he was off killing Israelites, pretending to side with the Philistines, but what he was really doing was going into Philistine territory, and he was killing those Israelites who were Philistine sympathizers. So basically, he was only killing people because basically he was looking towards the future. He decided, I'm just going to kill these people because that way it won't get back to the king that I'm killing actual Philistines. And by the time it gets back to the Israelites, it'll still sound like I'm a people's champion. That although I'm living in enemy territory, that I'm still fighting the good fight. So we now have him lying about where he is. He kept saying that he was in the Negev territory, the southern territory, and that he was raiding places that were Israelite territories. He kept trying to justify his actions to the enemy. And don't we do that? We try to justify our actions to the enemy as if that's who we need to be making claims to. And we can't justify before the Lord when we're doing something sinful because the Lord already knows our heart. He knows what we're up to. So David basically becomes a bandit, leading raiding parties. He becomes a thief, a thug, and a murderer. So later on, when you get to 2 Chronicles 28, 2 and 3, we're told that the reason why David couldn't build the temple to the Lord, why it had to fall to his son, the reason we're told that David couldn't do it is because he had blood on his hands. It says that he was disqualified from building the temple. And, our pastor talked about this, and I really believe it's also true, that the blood on his hands was not just that of Uriah the Hittite. David took his wife. Later on, we're going to get to that point. But I believe that the blood was on his hands from this very time because he was killing innocent people. Because the bloodshed that they talk about in 2 Chronicles, I guess the Hebrew term actually means innocent blood. So the innocent blood of these people, although they were Philistine sympathizers, that wasn't his fight to fight. And on top of that, he never inquired of the Lord. He was just doing these things on his own understanding, and he basically was gone off on his own tangent. So we're also told here, David had two issues. He thought what he was doing was justified for his people, and in truth, he became a deterrent to his people. And then secondly, his raids led to these unjustified murders. So you have these two things at play in David's life. And then on top of that, at the end of chapter 27, Achish, who was the king in Gath at the time, this Philistine king, he says, this is chapter 27, verse 12, says, Achish trusted David and said to himself, he has become obnoxious to his people, the Israelites, and he will be my servant for life. So that's an indictment to us as Christians that when the enemy seeks to keep you in his service, and you can't play in the enemy's territory. You just can't play in the land of the enemy and dwell with the enemy and live with the enemy like this and think there's going to be peace in your life. This man says he will be my servant for life. When the enemy plays, he plays for keeps. He's looking to keep you as his servant for life, serving the enemy. He does not want to relent. He's not going to just shrug it off and let you go peaceably. Even when you give your life to the Lord, the enemy's not going to just take that defeat. He's still going to come for you. And he's going to come for the exact things he knows that will be a problem. So for David, I know I talked about this a couple of sermon notes ago. For David, we see the problem with him is multiplicity. He's multiplying wives at this point. So the things we're told that that kings should not multiply is he should not multiply his horses because then he'll start trusting in his fleet. He should not multiply his gold, which means money, because then he'll be trusting in the money, trusting in the fleet, trusting in the money, not trusting the Lord. And thirdly, he should not be multiplying wives. And we're told almost every other chapter now how David has picked up wives. He had Michal as his first wife, which was Saul's daughter. She had been taken from him and bequeathed to someone else when Saul realized that he wanted to kill David. Then secondly, he had taken on another wife, you know, some other wife that we only heard a few details about. But then he also took on Abigail, which was the chapter that we talked about in the last sermon notes. He took along Abigail after Nabal, her husband, was killed by the Lord. So he's now got these 3 wives. Michael, of course, is, you know, somewhere else, given to someone else. But we're going to read later on that he does get Michael back. You know, once Saul's going to fall on his sword. Some things are going to happen. David is going to get Michael back. And then he's going to continue to collect wives after that, because we do know about Bathsheba. He collects her. But the interesting thing about this, and what I thought that was interesting that my pastor points out, if you get into 2 Samuel 3, I think it is, it starts talking about, let me see if I can find it. I meant to write the note down, but I was so entrenched in what my other notes I was taking. I think it's chapter 3. Anyway, it gets to the point where it tells you that Saul has this wife who was the daughter of, I think her name was Maacah, Maacah. Maacah, her father was a king in one of the lands that David had been raiding in during this time. So Maacah, his wife, was the mother of Absalom. When we get further down in the story, we're going to remember that Absalom is the one who starts to fight David furiously and sends David back into the caves and back on the run. His own son tries to take his kingdom away from him, and he starts to be political and starts trying to get people to follow him and trying to take over the kingdom. So David's kids end up being pretty much the death of him, because the wives and then the kids, the offspring from those wives, cost him nothing but grief. And so it's another indictment against plural marriages and people who have, I don't know how people can do it. I love my husband, but I could not imagine having more than one husband. I could not imagine him having more than one wife. So anyway, it's just an interesting thing. And as we follow this story, I think it's going to get more and more interesting. Well, I know it is. I actually know the stories. I know how it ends up. Another thing I want to talk to you guys real quick about in the sermon notes, besides the sermon notes, I have been using this Bible reading plan. I've used these before, but this is the most recent one. It's called the 1-Year Bible Reading Plan by Rose Publishing. It looks like this. You can actually get it from Amazon. I've had a few different reading plans. I've done the couple on Bible.com, but this one is really neat because it gives you an Old Testament, a New Testament, a Psalm, and a Proverb. So that's one of the plans. That's what it looks like. Sorry, those are my little marks in it. And then on the flip side, it gives you a second plan, which gives you, plan 2 is the 7 biblical sections. It gives you an epistle, the law, history, a psalm, poetry, a prophecy, and a gospel. So either way, and this is a really cool one too. So for this one, for week 1, you would read each one of these. You read one each day. And I'm going to do this one next after I finish the first one. So it's really cool because it gives you a couple of different ways you can go through the Bible. I really urge you, if you're not already daily reading. Oh, you know what? And there's a third plan here. I'm sorry. The third one is a beginning to end. It gives you the actual, it gives you the Bible. I don't know. It's hard to see that. Sorry about the glare. But beginning to end actually gives you the Bible in order, the way it actually happened. So chronologically speaking. So yeah, if you're not a student of the Word, then, you know, I urge you to try to consider becoming a student of the Word. Keep notes. I urge you to journal. I urge you to read daily. You know, of course, I'm not perfect. I miss some days, but I'm telling you, you really need this if you want to be a Christian in modern America. If you're in the world, period, you want to be as read up as you possibly can be. And I'm a historical student of the Word. I like knowing the details. I like looking at the maps and figuring out, where was this, and this used to be called that, now it's called something else, and trying to get an idea of how it must have been during that time, and just the historical data that goes along with it. Because, and I think it's important too when I'm teaching in the children's ministry, I like the whole historical notion, because I like to be able to share with them that these are real life events that actually happen. So that's just my take. That was our notes for today. Sorry the video is so long, But happy Vlogcember. I'm really enjoying some of the videos that people are putting out. And hopefully tomorrow I'll have some good content up for you guys. If you haven't already subscribed, please do subscribe. I have more variety than just the sermon notes. But if you stumbled upon this, welcome. I'm glad to have you. You know, don't just lurk. Please subscribe so you can be notified of when more videos are coming out. You can also hit the notification. I think there's either 3 dots or a bell somewhere around there that you can click on for notifiers. And I also do have an email address that's there. I have a Twitter, and I do have, and that's in my banner, and I do have an email address. If you check my the about section on my page, there is an email address if you want to send, you know, video ideas. If you want to send anything business related, that'd be cool too. If you just want to, you know, say hi, those are cool too. I'd like to be able to respond to those. I have it where it goes straight to my phone now. So that's all. Put God at the head of all you do, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.